Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Dika, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Here at SKIM, we're widely recognized as research heavyweights, and we've always been at the forefront of research innovation. Today is no exception, and we'll be sharing a great story about how and why next-generation research automation tools like artificial intelligence can help leading companies perform better. Today, I'm joined by Sam Bond, a highly acclaimed research manager with 6 years of consulting experience. Her expertise is in design and execution of complex global qualitative projects. She will share her Women versus Machine project today, one that was recognized by SMR as the best qualitative paper at the SMR Global Call 2017. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar panel. We will bring them up at the end of the presentation, or if we run out of time, we'll send an email to you. Now, without further ado, I'll turn time over to Sam.
Thank you, Dika. Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this webinar this morning on Woman versus Machine. As Dika said, my name is Sam, and I'm a passionate qualitative researcher here at SKIM. I want to start by saying that I really love my job. And a lot of what I've done is involved going into people's houses and spending time with them and doing pure ethnographic research, which I really enjoy. But at the beginning of last year, I was asked how I feel about my profession when looking into the future, say 10 years from now. And I have to be honest in that I said I was really concerned. And that's because of this increasing need to do research faster and more cheaply, and the difficulty that we're having trying to adapt our traditional processes. And it's for this reason that at SKIM we've been looking into potential solutions. And I'm happy to say that today I'm going to be telling you about an experiment that we conducted last year that's given us a feeling of optimism for the future. And that's because it's shown us that it's possible to reduce the time that it takes to conduct qualitative analysis without compromising the quality of our results. Now that sounds impossible, right? I mean, we're told that there's always meant to be a trade-off. And to be honest, that's what we expected too. But we learned that if we're open to collaborating with machines, there doesn't have to be. Now, before you start getting too skeptical, as I imagine you are, because we were too, we are going to go through the details. But before so, I just want to take you back to the catalyst for this study. Now, this was a response that we received from a client after putting our heart and soul into a proposal. The client came back and said that we're no longer in the rich years when we're looking at extensive projects stretching over 60K. We're now keen to do things in an agile way, faster, cheap, but still with rigor. Now, I appreciate that the industry is under pressure to change, but here we weren't talking about a pack test, for example. This was a highly strategic, high investment and risky initiative that was at stake, and it was happening in multiple markets. So I felt that surely this is a project that really needs some comprehensive qualitative research. But here's the thing. It seems that the tall orders our industry are facing isn't just confined to short-term tactical decision-making. We learned from conferences last year that the whole way in which clients are now having to make decisions is now fundamentally changing, with executives often being required to make lots of micro decisions at much shorter intervals, say 2 to 3 weeks, based on whatever knowledge that they have to hand at the time. So this means that no matter how insightful our extensive projects are, if they miss a gateway, it's basically rendering that insight worthless. So it was at this point that we realized we needed to reevaluate. We realized that if speed is going to come first, then this is a problem for Qual because it's a race that we're just not going to be able to win, not if we continue with our traditional methods. And to be honest, we just weren't willing to accept a future where our clients might have to rely on the numbers alone purely because they're quicker and easier to access. So rather than just stamping our feet and hoping that this problem was going to go away, instead we decided it was time to think in terms of solutions. But where to even start looking? Now, I'm sure many of you know that in the industry at the moment, there's been a lot of conversation around artificial intelligence and automation. There's a big debate as to whether this technology is going to be our savior because it helps us to save time, or our downfall because machines are going to be stealing our jobs. To be completely honest, I haven't really been paying that much attention to this discussion, and that's because I really didn't feel as though it was relevant to me as a qualitative researcher. For me, this type of automated technology is much more naturally aligned with structured quantitative processes. But then I found out that there are some agencies that are looking into chatbots to replace qualitative online moderation. And this certainly piqued my interest, even though I was pretty doubtful by the concept. I was really keen to find out more. I then came across BotSpotMe, and they put forward quite an interesting proposal. If you don't know them, BotSpotMe is a video company that captures qualitative consumer insights using self-recorded consumer videos. Now, traditionally, qualis and video haven't really had the happiest of relationship, and that's because the sheer amount of time that it takes to go through all those videos and do the analysis. But BotSpotMe were telling me that they could take the pain away, that they had all these AI and automated tools available that would make my life so much easier. But as I continued discussing it with them, I actually found out that whilst, yes, these tools are available, they can see through their platform that there's very little uptake of them, which means that researchers are continuing to use their traditional processes. And to me, this wasn't really a surprise. I couldn't imagine trusting a machine to do the analysis for me, let alone the concept of a machine being able to come up with better insights than I can. But you know what? I'd committed to looking into potential solutions, and I appreciate that I'm not always right. So for this reason, we decided to set up an experiment, a head-to-head competition between human analysis, machine analysis, and a mix of the two. The whole goal here was to find out whether automation in qualitative analysis is even possible, and if it is, how does it work, and what are the potential trade-offs when it comes to time, cost, and quality. Now, we didn't want to bias the results, and so for this reason, we set up two separate teams. We had an automated analysis team and a human analysis team. Both were tasked with analyzing 127 consumer videos, but they had to do so using different methodologies. So I was at the helm of the automated team, and we had at our disposal a whole host of automated tools alongside the videos and the transcripts. So I'll go through them in a bit more detail, but just to give you an overview, we had automated charts, we had an automated theme explorer, the sentiment analysis that was driven by IBM Watson, object recognition, and a variety of different filters. And our team was tasked with creating two types of outputs. Firstly, a top-line report, and the idea was that this would be produced using only the machine analysis output. So we were kind of envisaging a copy and paste type job. And then secondly, we had to create a full report using a mix of the machine analysis and the human analysis, so to see the potential of a collaborative approach. We then had our human team, and they had available to them the videos and the transcripts, and they were to analyze them as you would do using traditional human analysis. And for them, they only had one report to create, and this was a full human analysis only report. And this was to really be used as a benchmark in order to evaluate the insights that were identified by the automated team, and also to compare the time and the cost involved in actually creating each of the different outputs. So altogether, there were 3 outputs in total. Now, a big part of our objective was to understand the benefits and drawbacks of automation from an agency side perspective, but ultimately our goal here was to try and provide better solutions for our clients. It was therefore really important for us to really evaluate the full potential of automation to have a client-side judge on board. And it didn't take long for the ideal case study to arise. So when we went into this, we soon received a brief from our clients at Danone, where we needed to conduct qualitative analysis to explore a new category of product. They really wanted to understand what the drivers were for choosing this product and the consumption experience, so we could create claims to test quantitatively. But as is so often the case, the budget and timeline just couldn't accommodate the qualitative stage, not if we were going to use traditional methods. So we therefore took this opportunity to go to William at Danone and put forward this initiative to see if he wanted to also join us on this journey, to find out whether self-recorded consumer videos and automated analysis could be a potential solution to this common client challenge. And luckily for us, William was very excited and was keen to come on board. So When we agreed on the methodology and the approach and the objectives, etc., after this, his key role was to evaluate each of the 3 outputs, so the top line and then the 2 full reports. Firstly, he was to do so blind without knowing the methodology behind each one. And then after this, we did tell him the time, cost, and approach involved to create them to see whether or not this impacted his perceptions. Now, so we're now going to reveal to you the winner of the competition and to give you a little bit of insight into William's thinking and how he evaluated each of the outputs. And then afterwards, I'll take you through some of the learnings that we found from this experience as an agency. So, much to our surprise, the winning report did end up being the full one created by human and machine analysis. We found that using this collaborative approach, we were able to produce a report in half the time it took our human analysis team. But what was really interesting was that William actually chose this report as his preferred one, even before he found out it took less time to create. So from his perspective, he felt that both the full reports were equally insightful, but he felt that within the collaborative one, the insights were a bit easier to digest. So kind of seems that our original skepticism and doubts were unfounded, but not completely so. Because I have to mention that the machine on its own actually wasn't able to submit any output for William to evaluate, not even a top line. So even for this level of insight, a level of human analysis was required. But if we go back to the judge's verdict, here you can see an overview of William's evaluation. So deck 1 is the top line, and then deck 2 and 3 are the full reports, with deck 3 being the human analysis one. And if we start with deck 1, we find that the report that required the most amount of machine analysis and the least amount of human analysis wasn't deemed to be sufficient as a final deliverable. So whilst it only took 2 days to create, for William, he felt that the trade-off was just too big because it didn't provide him with the level of insight that he needed to guide his stakeholders in his decision-making. In comparison, whilst deck 2 took a few extra days to create, he felt that the return on investment was much greater because it did have the insights and the recommendations that he needed. So this really showed to us that it isn't just about speed alone, and it's super important to have this balance between time, cost, and quality. If we now compare the 2 full reports, we find here that using automated machine analysis during the process didn't have a negative impact. Here, there was no trade-off. You can see from his evaluation that in terms of the clarity and the depth of the insights and the actionability, they were seen as equal. The difference here was that with deck 3, as I mentioned, he felt that the insights were slightly harder to digest. And if you know a bit about the process that was involved in using the automated analysis tools, this kind of makes sense. So I'm now going to take you through our learnings from an agency side perspective so that you can understand this a little bit more. So as I mentioned, our first task as the automated analysis team was to produce this top line report using only the automated outputs. And as we started using these tools, we quickly realized that this just wasn't going to be feasible. And here we could see a real difference between automated qual analysis and automated quant analysis. So within our research, we did include some survey questions so that we could segment our consumers. And using this data, we could produce automated charts that provided standalone answers. For example, graphs that showed X percentage of consumers consider breakfast to be the most important mealtime. This was the kind of output that we could copy and paste with very little human involvement. However, we can then see here the type of outputs that were produced by the automated qualitative analysis. And these are types of answers that can't simply be copied and pasted. And there are a number of reasons why these shouldn't be considered standalone answers. So to explain to you some of the limitations that we experienced using these tools, I'm going to use the Theme Explorer automated output to illustrate some of our points. So the first limitation that we found was that these automated outputs don't provide meaning on their own. So here we can see some of the examples of the types of themes that were produced by the machine, such as breakfast, we have day, work, quick, example. So for example, without any context or dots connecting these words, it was very difficult to really understand their relevance. And this leads me on to the second point, and that's that the machines that we tested didn't connect the dots. And it's this connecting of the dots that really gives these outputs their meaning. So even on a basic level, themes like full, fuller, filling, the machine wasn't grouping these together to make a proper theme, let alone more sophisticated buckets, for example, different types of occasions. We then also found that it was very easy to misinterpret these results. So the machine and its outputs ranks their importance based on the number of mentioned. And if we take consumption occasions as an example, so when was it this new category of product was being used? We can see here for this segment of consumers, breakfast and morning is at the top. So we could assume that that's the answer. But if we look further down, we can see evening. And if we looked even further down, we could see snack. So this is just to show that if we rely on what the machine says is important, we might end up only telling half the story. We also found that these outputs can sometimes be simply wrong. And this was particularly the case when it came to the IBM Watson sentiment analysis. So here you can see underneath each of the words that it was broken down into positive, negative, and neutral sentiment. And this was the case on a theme level, on a sentence level, and also a question level. But more often than not, our team didn't agree with the sentiment that was assigned to each of these. And finally, we found that machines can't read between the lines. And as we know that in qualitative research, it's so important to both evaluate what is said and what isn't said, but a machine can't flag information that's not there. So if during the initial stage, we find out that there's 5 core consumer breakfast needs, but then when it comes to the product evaluation, we find that it's not meeting 2 of these, the machine isn't going to connect those 2 together to give us the answer. Human analysis is required for that. So overall, we learned from this process that whether we need to create a top line or whether we need to create a full report, human analysis is needed to identify the insights within the information and the automated outputs. So as I'm sure you can imagine, when the team first started using these tools, they quickly became very, very frustrated. And they kind of wanted to give up on using them. They thought they were neither helpful nor accurate. But as we know, it was the collaborative approach that ended up producing the winning report. So it's a good job that we persisted. And that leads me on to our next learning. And that we found here that whilst these automated outputs can't provide standalone answers, we did find that they can facilitate high-speed analysis. So whereas for our human team, they had to go through all the videos and transcripts in order to analyze the information, our automated analysis team got to start with the automated outputs. So by starting with these rather than the raw data, we were very, very quickly able to extract the key findings. It actually took us only 1 day to do so. So I guess going back to that theme explorer to illustrate this, we found that simply by reviewing all the words produced, of which there were absolutely loads, and connecting the dots ourselves, we could really quickly hypothesize what the real themes were. And then we only needed to review a sample of the consumer responses behind the different ones, just to check that we were on the right track and we were analyzing the information correctly. So by going through this process, we were able to produce this top-line report in only 2 days. But I really want to emphasize here that high-speed analysis results in high-level findings. So this type of output produced information rather than insights. And that was the reason why William felt he couldn't use it to, I guess, make his business decisions. So our next challenge then for our team was to produce the full report. And here we learned that the creation of a full strategic report can't forgo strategic human thinking. To be honest with you, having extracted the top-line insights within only 1 day, we thought it would take no time at all to produce the full report. whereas in actual fact, it took an additional 4 days. So we learned here that no different to traditional qualitative research, time was needed for human thinking. We needed to analyze the top-line findings within the context of our client's business challenge and to dig deeper into the data in order to translate the information into actionable insights and to craft a story that really led the reader's attention to a set of key messages. So whilst both of the full reports required this analytical strategic thinking, I also have to admit that my team did have a helping hand. So using the top-line insights, we found that this really focused our attention when it came to digging deeper. We used this again as the starting point in which to think strategically and go back into the data. And then when it came to going back into the data, unlike the other team, we didn't have to go trawling back through the videos and transcripts. Instead, we had all these various advanced filters and the keyword searches, which meant that we could really quickly flesh out these key themes and explain what the drivers were. So it was a very structured approach. And we found that by doing this process, we ended up connecting more dots and ended up having these deeper thought patterns and processes, which really helped to strengthen and to structure our story. Now, this might all sound simple, but it was this collaboration between a human's analytical thinking and the ability of the machine to guide our exploration and to sift through large quantities of data that led to this full report being created in half the time that it took our human analysis team. So this is the first time that we've dipped our toes into the world of qualitative automation. And I have to admit that despite our initial skepticism, we really have been convinced by the benefits this technology can offer us. And this is actually despite the fact that at the moment, these tools are pretty limited in terms of their sophistication. So we found that it was the basic tools like the keyword searches and the theme explorer and the filters that helped us the most when it came to saving time, rather than the types of machines that required machine intelligence, like the sentiment analysis and the object recognition. But having said that, we really do feel that these tools have greater potential than their current capabilities. So as this technology develops, we can see it getting to a point where the machine is able to group together words with similar meanings and similar occasions, and to be able to connect the dots between different themes so that we can understand the drivers more quickly. But even so, we think that this would then help us to produce those top lines with less human input and actually create more time for us to do our strategic thinking. Because ultimately, no matter how sophisticated these tools get, we really don't think that the need for human analysis is going to go away. So all in all, we're happy to say that this is a positive news story for researchers, clients, and little robots alike. We learned that even despite the limited sophistication of these tools, we could still halve the time it took to create a full report without compromising the quality of our insights. And we also learned through this process the importance of humans in driving this analysis process. So the role of these tools is really to facilitate us rather than to replace researchers. So we hope that you also can have a greater feeling of optimism and the fact that these types of tools can be our allies rather than our rivals. And we really do feel that this technology can help our qualitative industry to adapt its processes and to remain accessible to our clients in the face of these increasing efficiency pressures, because it can help us to deliver on time, cost, and quality expectations. So it's for this reason that our client at Danone was so pleasantly surprised by the outcome of this study. It really wasn't what he expected, but he feels it can much better help him to meet his stakeholders' needs. And it's for this reason we've now repeated the study in Germany as well. So to end, I want to leave you with a few tips for when it comes to collaborating with machines. Our first tip is that skepticism and distrust is going to be inevitable. If we want to reap the rewards of automation, we're really going to have to aim to push past this. Secondly, don't expect machines to provide the answers. We feel it's really important to go into using these tools with realistic expectations. So linked to this It's about using the automated outputs as a starting point for human analysis, and to expect high-speed analysis to produce high-level findings. Because ultimately, being strategic is something that takes time, and this is simply a corner that can't be cut. Thank you very much for listening.